Okay, now let's talk about London Calling. So I know that, we started London Calling and it was kind of a whirl because we had Summit, and we had Hang 10, we had all the things going on. So I want to take a step back and I want to talk exactly about what London Calling is, and I want to unpack it for you guys, specifically the foundation paper piecing, because this is new for us, right? Cotton Cuts has never done a foundation paper piece project before. This is new. We were testing it out to see if you guys like it. And I want to make sure that we give you as much information as we do for our pre-cut products. So Patch, it is Wednesday at 9:00 a.m. Central Time. So 9:00. We're making 9:00 the standard Cotton Cuts Clue release time. We've been doing that for years for the PMQ. So 9:00 Central Time. Our reveal might be a little different because depending on the filming that we have that day, but 9:00 is going to be our standard clue drop. Okay, back to London Calling. So everyone got these lovely kits in the mail. And so depending on what month it is, it has the fabrics displayed on it on the back side of this. And I know that, don't feel stupid, right? If you didn't turn it over, and the instructions are here. And so here is the actual instructions for what to do with your foundation paper piecing kit. And so there are two sizes. There's a throw size and a twin size. Depending on what size you're doing, it gives you instructions for what's actually included inside the kit. And then the instructions are simplified. So we can't necessarily teach you how to foundation paper piece, right? And the purpose of this segment here is not to teach you how to foundation paper piece. That is a class. That is a bunch of YouTube videos. That is a skill that while we love, is really hard to explain on a half sheet of paper. And so what we've done is we've given you references for places to go to learn how to foundation paper piece. It's a super visual skill. It is definitely something that you can definitely learn online and then be able to apply those skills to this project. Let's see here. And so there's descriptions here on how to pick your pattern. So depending on the size that you have selected, you're going to want to go to this scrappy pad of paper. And I'm going to actually zoom in for a little bit. So when we were zooming in with our team, I want to make sure everyone can see it, because you can't necessarily on the website see the incredible design elements that are in all of these triangles. And so with one pad of paper, you're going to be making one of each of these triangle blocks using the fabrics that you receive. If you're making a throw, you're going to pull 10 pieces of paper a month. If you're making a twin, you're going to pull 15 pieces of paper a month. And those are the triangles that you're going to make with the fabric that we've sent you. Now, the fabric inside the kit, depending on your size, is either a fat quarter, a fat eighth. It's a 13-inch width of fabric, or it is kind of a half 13-inch width of fabric, we'll call it. There is tons of fabric in these kits, you guys. It is about 250% of what you would need to do 10 or 15 blocks. We added a lot of safety to this, you guys, because we wanted you guys to be successful. We didn't want to cut the fabric so lean and so short that you could not finish. So there is about 250% of the amount of fabric you're going to need to complete the project was sent to you, which means you'll have extra fabric. And so I've seen someone in the Facebook group who actually bought one of these pads of papers in stars and is going to use her scraps to make other complementary blocks. Just saying, it's an idea. You can use it, but you will have extra fabric. So if you make a mistake, please, please, please do not feel bad. Do not feel like you've made a mistake and the entire project is ruined and you want to set it aside. For this project, we've included extra fabric for those mistakes, for those changes in design, for those things that you want to do differently. So please do not feel like I've made a single mistake and I can't do any more of it. And again, we're testing the concept of cotton cuts with foundation paper piecing. And this is one of the approaches we're taking, is to give you more fabric to give flexibility in the finished product. Now, if you're a super fantastic foundation paper piecer and you have a lot of leftover fabric, right? You might be able to make more than 10 or 15 blocks. Fantastic. More power to you. Do it. Use it. The fabric is meant to be used. It's meant to be loved. Please don't stash your scraps. Use them. And this is a fantastic project to use them with. Okay, now inside the kit, there were a couple things, and this is universal for both the bear claws and the foundation paper piecing. So the first is a fantastic sticker. So we heard you guys, we heard that you loved the logo, and so we decided to use it, print it on a sticker that can be put on water bottles. You can put it on notebooks. You can put it on your sewing machine. You guys can put the sticker anywhere. This is for you guys to know, use, and love. Please know, use, and love it. We're proud of it. I know you guys loved it, so we're definitely going to run that up the flagpole again. And then we have my favorite, which is Fancy Nancy. And so Flat Nancy is a character that's been common to Cotton Cuts for many years. And so we put flat Nancy's out. Take a picture with your clue, post it where you're going to be sewing from, enter to win prizes. We do giveaways. There's a map. You can actually go and see an interactive map of where everyone is sewing their flat Nancy from. Love flat Nancy, love, love, love. And for this Liberty of London project, London Calling, we decided to create a character. So this is Fancy Nancy. Fancy Nancy is dressed up and ready to go to London. And on the back of all the Fancy Nancys is she is taking the London Tube, the London Underground, to different historical landmarks all around London. And so on the back, we give you a picture of where she's going to next, a description of the location, and then here is a ticket. And her starting point for this one is Big Ben, Westminster. And her first stop is going to be Tower of London. And so we have given you a website on here to go to and tell us what tube stops is Nancy going to use to get from Big Ben to Tower of London. We've also included this little handy dandy sheet so you can keep track of where she started, where she's going to, and how she's going to get there. We do have a map on the back. It's a little blurry, you guys. I get it, right? We have a lot of tube stops that we were trying to get on this, and some of them printed a little clearer than others, but it is a little blurry. If for some reason, Stacy's telling you guys she's going to take the red line a couple stops. That is absolutely true. Thank you, Stacy. But on here, right, you can use this map to map how is she going to, you can mark it up. This is your map. Nobody's going to take this back from you at the end of the project. You can mark how she's getting. It does this if it matches the real tube maps. And so this one should match the real tube maps, how she's going to get from stop A to stop B. Now, if you are someone who, relies on technology and loves technology and appreciates technology, there are a lot of trip finders out there where you can say, if I was to start at Big Ben and go to Tower of London, how would I get there? And it'll give you the exact train stops. I'm not going to stop you guys from doing that. That's another way to enjoy this program. As long as you are just following Fancy Nancy around London, we have prizes. We just gave out a whole bunch of gift cards for month 1. And we're going to do the same thing for all the next stops. This is just, it has nothing to do with quilting, but it's fun. And I've said this before, I like enriching the experience. Like this is just a fun way to enrich the experience. And for example, I'm a huge history person. I like the education elements to this. And so we always put a little blurb around the location. And so 900 years of royal history, the crown jewels, and a flock of ravens who are official employees of the crown, complete with a daily food allowance. Don't mess with the ravens, right? So it's just fun stuff. Let's see here. Anne says she didn't get any of it in a package. It was definitely included in month 1. And if you did not get it, please send us a note at help@cotton.com and we will get them to you. We don't want to leave you behind. But definitely all of these things were in all of the bear claws and all of the foundation paper piecing for clue 1 for London Calling. Now, let's talk about how we actually convert our fat quarters, our fat 8s into these foundation paper pieces. And so I have my list of tips and tricks with 5 secrets that I'm going to share with you guys for all the foundation paper pieces that are out there. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to select your papers from the pad. You're going to select either 10 or 15. Now you should have 2 pads or 3 pads. You could take I'm just going to take the first 10 papers and that's what I'm going to sew. You could be very analytical about this and take 1 from the top and then count some down and then take 1 and then count the same number down if you want it evenly distributed. The way these blocks are sorted is the first paper is the easiest and it goes all the way to the hardest, the most complex as you get down. What I did was I just pulled a pad of paper, I skipped a page, I pulled a pad of paper, I skipped a page, and I pulled a pad of paper. It is going to look amazing no matter what. And it's just a matter of pulling those 10 papers or pulling those 15 papers out of your out of your paper. Not important necessarily to number them per se, but what my first secret and my first tip and trick for this is once you have your papers pulled, is actually map out and lay out where you want your fabric to be and then write on the actual paper where the color goes. And so I want to show you guys one that I did. And so here is what the back of the paper actually looks like. So I put that it was going to be cream, pink, our focal print, our yellow, and our aqua. And I want to show you how I got there. So Paula, if we can show the first photo. So I had the paper on the table and I put my fabrics down and I kind of arranged them roughly where they're going to be. Do we have the first photo? Okay, she's getting it. And so I auditioned them in these spots because where are they going to go? How is it going to work? And so I took the 4 prints and I laid them out. And that's roughly where they're going to end up. And when I looked at it, I was like, gosh, that yellow is a lot, right? And I mean, if you're a yellow person, you love yellow, that's fantastic. Go ahead and keep it there. But for me, I felt like the yellow read too loud in this layout. So Paula, the second photo, please. And so what I did then is I just moved it around, and literally I'm cutting nothing, you guys. And so I know there's this fear to cut because once you cut, it can't be reversed. These are the fabrics actually directly out of the bag. And I'm just laying them down to see if I like them where they're at. And I liked this second orientation. And that's actually, Paula, we're good. That's actually what I finished with, right? And so I additioned the fabrics in those spaces. Let me see if I can get it to zoom in and focus on that. And so I additioned the fabrics in those spaces, and then I put them there. But before I did that, I marked on the back where each print would go. Because foundation paper piecing has this front and back and front and back, I actually wrote down on this exactly where I want it to go. Any pen will work. Just make sure you don't use anything where it's like a felt, like it has, where it has some marker type elements that might bleed through the paper. You definitely don't want that to bleed through your fabric. But by marking that, and then I went through all of my papers. My advice here is to take your time. Go ahead and just mark out and have that plan. And once I sewed the first one, I started getting more comfortable with how these colors were going to play together. And I was able to mark more confidently because as I looked at kind of the second block I did, right? Again, to me, that yellow read very loud. Again, that's my personal preference. That might not read loud to you, but it reads loud to me. And so I only wanted to use it once. And then here I mirrored outbound the focal and the pink and then the aqua and the far sides. However, if you want to go focal, pink, yellow, focal, like you can do whatever you want in that space. But this is what rang true to me when I was laying the fabrics out. And then I got to this shape. And I know that sometimes if there's more than 4 fabrics, it can be daunting as to how to use the fabrics. We as quilters like things that are in symmetry. We like things that are evenly balanced around the outside. And so oh yes, Lori, that's absolutely fantastic. When you go to mark on the back side, when you go to do this, like I did, using a pencil is another fantastic option. Pencil's another fantastic, it just might smear a little bit and it might leave a little ink on your fingerprints. And we're working with this cream. It might be something just to be a little careful about, which is totally fine. Right. So Pat is saying with her and her eye, the pink screams to her. With me and my eye, the yellow screams to me. And so in this case, I put the pink and the yellow right next to each other, then the focal and the aqua. And then I started to find a pattern. I was like, I really like this aqua on the outside. I like how it connects to the focal print, and I like the pink and the yellow next to each other. So I did it again. So pink and yellow with the aqua on the outside and the focal print buying and connecting them all together. And then here, this is one that was done by M on our team. And so the yellow evidently screamed so loud to her, she booted it off the block, right? And so this is also saying that you don't have to use every fabric in every block. And so I think that when we're looking at this, we're like, I have to get every fabric in every block. You do not. Do not for any 1 second think that you have to use every fabric in every block. You could come up with a strategy where you use just the focal print and just one color in every block. And so then your next block, this one could be focal print in pink. The next one could be focal print in aqua. The next one could be focal print in yellow. It does not have to use every fabric in every block. And so I think that's not a requirement. That's definitely something that we kind of inflict upon ourselves. We feel like it has to balance and it has to be even. Most definitely does not. And I want you to free yourself of that constraint as you're sewing this project. Let's see here. Sarah's asking, will yardage be available for sale after I'm going rogue and want to have some extra? Yes. So once we get past month 3 and signups close, we're going to start loading fabric to the website. Right now, we're still getting people sign up. So I want to make sure we have fabric in order to be able to make all their kits. So we will have yardage, and we'll announce that and post that in the group when that happens. Okay. So my secret, secret number 2 was that we have more than enough fabric here, you guys. And so I feel like sometimes when we're foundation paper piecing, we get real skimpy and we get real lean. We definitely have more than enough fabric to make a mistake. Now, when you are sewing these guys, my third secret is when you're stitching on paper, there are a couple tools that are going to help you with this. And so the first is the add a quarter ruler. We've given add a quarters at a couple of retreats. If you have that, please use that here. That's a fantastic way to trim out some of the bulk in the back, especially when you're dealing with shapes like this. I would even consider using an add an 1/8 here because those shapes are really close together and your seam allowance on the back can have a lot of extra. So add a quarter, add an 1/8 is going to be a friend for you here. And I would also suggest in the same kind of tip, the dry iron and a clapper. Now, A clapper, we've given away some of the retreats, but as you iron these back, you're going to want that to take a real solid press. Every seam you want to take a solid press with a dry iron, and you want the clapper to retain the heat in there as long as possible to make sure it stays crisp. Because one of the biggest challenges and frustrations for foundation paper piecers is you go to sew your second piece on, and before you know it, things have flipped or it's not necessarily as tight as it should be. So a clapper, a dry iron, and add a quarter. Those are tools you should have handy and ready and available. I'm not normally you have to have this tool. It can't be done otherwise. It can most definitely be done otherwise. These things just make your lives a little easier. The piecing happens by first piecing all of these triangle sections together. So you start first with the color. Foundation paper piecers will know that you start with number 1, which is for me here. Then you do 1, 2, 3, and 4. Then we get to the 4th and 5th secret. We have mixed pre-cut parts and pieces with foundation paper piecing for this project. I'm going to say that again. We have mixed pre-cut parts and pieces. I know I have some here. We've mixed pre-cut parts and pieces with the foundation paper piecing. We have taken that large triangle and we have cut it for you, right? And so I want to zoom in on that. This is the background fabric. The background fabric is the same for the bear claws as well as the foundation paper piecing, but we have cut this for you. And so we did that because we didn't want to have to send you yardage that you'd have to cut a 6 7/8 square and then cut it on a diagonal and deal with the dog ears, right? We can do that here in the shop. We have die cutters that do it. But what happens is after you piece together all of these guys and you go to piece on this triangle, traditional piecing says to use a 1/4 inch seam allowance, which is fantastic in everything but foundation paper piecing, because you don't sew with a 1/4 inch seam allowance. You sew on a line on a piece of paper. And so this is where we have to kind of flip our brains just a little bit. And so when we are cutting with everything that's pre-cut, especially by Cotton Cuts, it is always a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. If I take this triangle and I put it on my foundation paper and I line it up, right? And I'm like, I know I have to stitch on this angle. And so I'm going to line it up and my dog ears and everything looks aligned because I'm a quilter and, you know, it looks great. And I wanted to stitch on that diagonal. What's going to happen is when I flip it over, we're going to lose the 3 stitch lengths that are lost by not using a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance. If you line it up, and you line it up completely, you know, line up your right triangles here, line up your dog ears here. When you flip it over, you're going to lose that scant 1/4 inch seam allowance that we have to have with pre-cut parts and pieces. And this is what's going to happen. I'm going to see if you can zoom in. So mine are a little short. And I know I've seen a lot of comments on the Facebook group about they're real tight, they're a little short, they're a little wonky. And so here is a perfect example of my first one and exactly how that happened. I lined it up even in the corner and I stitched along the diagonal. And before you know it, I lost that 3 thread widths because of the scant 1/4 inch seam allowance we have to use. So some tips to help you as you're sewing the mix between pre-cut parts and pieces and the foundation paper piecing. So the first one is cut your paper on the dotted line before you stitch your cream on. So foundation paper piecers will know this is a 1/4 inch seam allowance here on this dotted line. Normally you don't cut that until the block is completely assembled. You don't cut it down. I am encouraging you to, once you've pieced these guys together, to trim it down before you add this triangle, before you add your cream triangle. So you want to cut down your paper in order to be able to get your scant 1/4 inch. You're going to cut it all down. Then what you're going to do is you're actually going to sew it on so that way your square is a little, your triangle leaves just a teeny tiny little bit of space here. And so I hope you guys can see it on Instagram. You're going to leave just a little bit of space, leave a little bit of that color popping up. And what that's going to do is when you stitch it that way, bam, everything is perfect. So everything that I've done since that first one, when I trim the paper and then line it up, so my triangle is just a little bit on the inside like this, so I can see a little bit of the color coming through. Everything has lined up perfectly. Everything is going to be right to that corner, and I've had no problem since following that step. Let's see here. Patch is saying her pre-cut was just a little smaller than stated, just gonna roll with it. And so it works, it's that scant 1/4 inch. Like if you're piecing for a PMQ, we always tell you to use a scant 1/4 inch seam allowance because of the fabric rolling over. And so here, because it's on paper and because there's a lot of seams that are together, you might be losing a little bit more than those 3 threads, which is why we recommend doing it this way. However, Patch is absolutely right. This little bit here, this is not going to necessarily kind of kill your project. It's just going to mean your seam allowance there might be a little thinner than you would like it to be, but it is not going to kill your project because you can definitely still have plenty of access to that stitch line. Now, my next and last tip is these parts and pieces, right? So we've got these guys here on paper, and that's a big triangle to put on your foundation paper. And what's going to happen is, we got to do a lot of these. So did you guys see what just happened to mine? Like it flipped over, right? That is a lot of fabric here to leave kind of free hanging. And so one of the insider tips and tricks for foundation paper piecing is to use either kids stick glue or EPP paper glue. And what you can do is you just tack it down. You don't need to go all the way around with your glue. Just put a little bit of glue here, and that's going to keep that actually like just tacked, not glued. We're tacking, not gluing. That's going to tack your triangle here, so that way it'll maintain its shape. So when I stitch these together, I won't have to worry about any of this like excessive fabric flopping over. And so I know that when we use English paper piecing, we've got the glue for our papers. You can definitely use that glue here on fabric. School glue works as well. It is just a light tack. I would not suggest at all kind of trying to do all of it. We just want enough so that way it stays attached to this paper. So when I sew it together, it stays in its happy place. Okay. Those are my 5 tips and tricks. I hope at least one thing was new for you guys and that you found that valuable. But sew your 10 blocks, sew your 15 blocks. Definitely post those on social media. You're going to see a lot more from us about this. Em has done this lovely block and she's ripped out her paper. So you can see like it's actually a very lightweight. I like the texture of this fabric. I think it lends itself very, very well to foundation paper piecing, which is why there's a lot of FPP paper patterns for this type of fabric because the texture lends itself very nicely to it. If you slide to expose the color, are you actually making your cream a wider seam than narrow? Let me think about that for a second. Okay. You actually are. You needed to go the other direction. Thank you, Kimberly. We actually needed to go the other direction. That is on me because it is the end of the show and it is 1,000 degrees in these lights. So what you actually need to do is make sure that your triangle goes a little past your color. So when you're looking at it from the back, it goes this way. We will post a tutorial with photos and tips and tricks on how to do this, but you need a little bit of your cream to pop up and it is going to be way clearer. We'll also email everyone that's doing foundation paper piecing so you guys know this trick. And you should actually slide it so that way it's this way. Then that way it'll make your triangle flop in the right direction. And if you have to seam rip, it's absolutely a-okay. I'm not going to tell anyone. I will tell you that I had to seam rip 1 or 2 seams. It's totally fine. In the finished quilt, you're never going to know. And if you have to do it, it's fine. Do you peel the paper off to sew the squares together? And that is a fantastic debate that I think foundation paper piecers are going to be on both sides of the fence on. For me personally, I keep them on the papers until I stitch them together and then I tear it off the finished project. It's definitely something like M, right? She tore her papers off at this stage. That's absolutely fine as well. None of this is really too tiny. I feel like if it gets to be really tiny, you're trying to tear the papers off on a bigger project, you're going to be picking that for a long time. For me, for the size of this project, my intention, Anne, is to keep it on the paper for the entire time. Let's see here. Linda's saying, thanks for the tip. She had a moment trying to get it to fit. I don't tear them off either. It keeps them more stable. Yeah. And especially in a project like this, it's going to be multiple months. You're going to be handling them a little bit more than you probably would. And, this triangle, I will talk about bias edges for a second. So this triangle, the bias edge is actually stitched in. So you don't necessarily have to worry about distortion on these 2 edges here on the top and the side, because it's cut as a half triangle. All your bias edges are attached. But depending on how you cut these, you might have some bias edges here that you did just because of the way you piece it together with the foundation paper piecing. And for me, I'd rather keep it on the paper to make sure that those edges stay as straight as possible. Okay, until they're stitched together, because once I take this and I stitch it to its friend, right? Once I take this and stitch it to its friend, then those bias edges are going to be encapsulated and I can tear the papers out and not worry about anything on this edge stretching or distorting or getting out of whack. Okay. All right. Any more questions about London calling, you guys? SP Miller. Sorry, don't know your name, leaves it on and uses a 1.6 stitch length so the stitches stay intact while I take the paper off. Yes, that is a foundation paper piecing basic, which you would in all the videos and tutorials. One of the things you have to do is shorten your stitch length. A couple of reasons for that. When you tear the paper, you don't want any of your stitches coming apart, but the shorter your stitch length in, the easier it is to peel the paper as well, because the paper has been punctured so many times, it will practically just fall off. And ask me how I know. You can probably stitch through it 3 times before it falls apart. That's how many times I had to rip a given seam. Okay. All right, you guys, I know that was a lot. And I know that, sometimes there's tips and tricks that you might know. Sometimes you're going to be learning. I know hang 10, we've got a lot more coming on that, but we wanted to give you just kind of a drive through at a 30,000 foot level on both of these projects. So everyone is ready as those London calling kits are arriving to you and as the hang 10 kits are arriving to you. And just make sure that you guys have information to be able to feel empowered when these arrive to sew them versus stashing them because for whatever reason, there's a fear that you don't want to get started. We want you to get started. We want to make it as easy as possible.